Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have you with us tonight. And my two guests, or my new co-host, Zach Hirsch, is on the line, along with Les Wolff. Glad to have you guys on the broadcast. Our focus will be on boxing memorabilia, and for that matter, we might even go into sports memorabilia. Glad to have you two guys on the program tonight.
Thanks for having me on. Scott, this is Les Wolff from Les Wolff Sports.
And Zach?
Great to be here. I can't think it's going to be a great show.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. So let's go over a few main points here, and then we'll continue to add stuff as we go along. Now, first of all, Zach, you wanted to let people know about your memorabilia, whether it's sports or boxing. Why don't you let Les know what you have, okay?
Yeah, so I've actually got some cool memorabilia as a person who's not necessarily an avid collector, and I don't represent myself as one, but I've been able to pick up some cool stuff, and I've been able to be fortunate enough to be gifted some great stuff over the years. And as a huge sports fan, it's awesome, and I have it all hanging in my room. And I've got stuff from pretty much every sport. I have a Troy Aikman signed jersey hung up in my room. I have a pair of Michael Jordan shoes, a Floyd Mayweather championship belt, Muhammad Ali gloves, a Pete Rose hat, a Venus Williams signed poster, a Dan Marino signed jersey, and some other things. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to collect stuff from all different types of sports.
That's some cool stuff you got there. Hopefully you have it properly framed and protected so it doesn't get faded and damaged. That's one of the things I teach a class how to collect, invest, protect, and preserve memorabilia. Because a lot of collectors don't know how to properly frame and how to properly preserve their memorabilia. They put it haphazardly on the wall, in the wrong frame, or facing sunlight, or facing the wrong lighting in the house, and the wrong temperature. So there's a lot of factors involved. That's one of the things, one of the courses I teach.
So hopefully I have it all hanging up right. Maybe I'll have to send you some pictures after the broadcast, and you can tell me.
Well, the key there is basically having UV protected glass and museum quality glass to protect it from the sunlight and from the light. So you have to have the windows tinted with UV protection, and you have to have the lights, LED lights, and the temperatures need to be 68 to 72. And you got to have a dehumidifier in this. All those things play a major factor in, and also whatever the item is signed on, whether it be a glove, a basketball, a folder, it also depends on the kind of pen, because some pens will absorb more into the item.
That's really valuable information.
So what's your favorite item that you have up there?
My favorite is probably the pair of Michael Jordan shoes.
Now tell me about the shoes. Were they game used? What's the story with them?
Yeah, he wore them, and he signed them. He's a size 13. They're, I think, Jordan 15s. And I just think they're awesome to have the greatest basketball player of all time, one of the most influential athletes of all time, to have a pair of his shoes. And Michael Jordan shoes aren't a normal pair of shoes. They're probably the most legendary sports shoe of all time.
Absolutely. Now, the key thing now is you know that they're authentic, or you're telling me they're authentic. How would the average person know that those sneakers are authentic? Do you have what is called provenance, a story behind it, telling you whether or not when those shoes were worn, where they were worn, and when, what the date and time that he wore it? Do you have anything to verify that?
Yeah, I have papers.
Okay, and what do the papers say? The reason why I'm asking you these questions is because there's a lot of fraud that has been perpetrated in the business, and I always ask people to give me full provenance, meaning a full story on it, because I've handled a lot of wild things in sports memorabilia, but the whole thing is, as long as it has documentation, it can prove what it is, that helps to sell the item and helps to make the end user, the client, the customer, or the collector very, very confident in buying it. Because it's not, a lot of this stuff has gone into, used to be in the hundreds and thousands, now it's going into hundreds of thousands. So you want to make sure that stuff is all properly protected and proper provenance, I mean the proper story behind it.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of bad stories from people who buy fake baseball cards in particular.
Well, it's true in anything else. It's all about, and I always tell people, when you're first starting out or you're collecting, you need to collect stuff that you know what you're doing, because a lot of items, the stuff is phony. You have to watch out. You have to learn. So that's a very key thing.
Yeah. As a boxing fan and a professional memorabilia collector, who are some of your favorite boxers' memorabilia to collect?
To collect, Well, I've always been a Muhammad Ali fan, and after meeting him, the only day I ever cut school in high school, I met him the first time after. Actually, it's going to be celebrating 50 years ago that I met him, because next year is the fight of the century when he fought Joe Frazier. So I had my picture in the paper the first time. I cut school in high school. The only time I ever cut school, hid the papers from my parents, because one of my friends said, "Oh, I'm going to tell your parents." So I hid it for a couple of years till I was in college, and then I showed it to them. I became friends with Muhammad and actually did a TNT special with him with my memorabilia. So Muhammad is one of the nicest athletes I've ever met in my lifetime, and probably one of the nicest that anybody will ever meet, because he was just so genuine. He's like the guy next door. So that's why I collect him. I collect all the heavyweight champions. I collect just about everything that I've always liked in sports, but primarily the heavyweight champions. I have every heavyweight champion except for Marvin Hart on a signed photo from John L. Sullivan, the president right now. So that's just
it's an incredible story.
Oh,
Muhammad Ali, not only the greatest in the ring, but the greatest outside the ring. The things he was able to do outside of boxing, and the way he was able to unify the people and fight for what he believed in is just incredible.
Yes, he was. But like I said before, the main thing is he was just so down to earth. You know, the athletes you meet nowadays, they wouldn't take the time to talk to you and befriend you and do the things that Muhammad did, because a lot of these guys don't have the time, and they don't appreciate their fans like Muhammad did, and that's important, very important. And now with the pandemic and the virus out there, you know, these athletes are going to have to. They're probably not going to be able to get near their fans now because of all this stuff. But it's not going to be the same. But somehow we have to figure out a way for these athletes to connect with the kids, the young people, for the hobby to keep on going and the business to keep on going, because the card companies are not catering to the young kids. They're mainly catering to kids that have a lot of money, or people that have a lot of money, because that's where their market is. And I think they're missing out on a big thing in the industry. At least that's my opinion. What do you think of that?
I think that's a great point. When I hear about the older generations and how they collected, especially the biggest one I've always heard is baseball cards, but different all types of cards. It seems to be a different time than right now, where I don't really see too many kids collecting cards. My younger cousins used to collect basketball and football cards, but that phase kind of stopped. And when I go to the store and stuff like that, I don't see too many cards, and I don't hear about kids collecting memorabilia too much. And I think it's an art form that's been lost from generation to generation.
Well, it's not so much an art form. It's so much as that the big companies aren't catering to the kids. They're pricing the cards like crazy prices for packs of cards. And the box, you get one chance of getting like a special autograph card or a special card, and you're spending $500 to $1,000 for that box. And when you figure it out, when you tear open all the packs, you'd be lucky if you get back a fraction of that, unless you get the Zion Williams of that pack, or the Bryce Harpers, or the Aaron Judges. You know, the probability of that is not going to be that high. So it's kind of tough. I mean, I always tell my clients, and I tell anybody that listens to me, that my advice is always collect vintage. Vintage meaning the older vintage stuff. The Mickey Mantles, the Babe Ruths, the Michael Jordans, the Ben Hogans, the Bobby Joneses, the Bronco Nagurskis, the older vintage guys. I mean, you get the idea, because that stuff is drying up. More and more collectors are going to buy it, keep it, and not do anything with it. And that's where the business is lacking. We need more people, the younger kids, the younger people, to invest in the older stuff, because that's where the money really is. I mean, you look at the Mickey Mantle cards. I mean, one recently went for $2.8 million for a rookie card. I mean, that's crazy. You look at the Michael Jordan stuff. This stuff right now is on fire because of the show, The Last Dance. Everybody's rushing. They want Michael Jordan stuff now again. I mean, in all my years, I think he's by far one of the best all-time players I've ever seen. And he was so dedicated, but you've seen another side of him, the story on it, and it's really tough life for him. And it's not that easy, but he was the greatest player I've ever seen, the most clutch shooter I've ever seen. So those pair of sneakers you have there, you better take care of them, but have that insured and properly protected, because that's gold. That's a gold investment.
So on that note about how memorabilia fluctuates along with the athlete, when Muhammad Ali passed away a few years ago, did that affect his memorabilia prices?
normally when an athlete or a celebrity or anybody passes away, there's a lot of people that are going to run to eBay or run to buy everything they can of it because memorabilia is really the memories, and it connects you to that athlete, and people feel that connection. Unfortunately, Muhammad's prices were up there before he passed away, and after he passed, may he rest in peace. His prices did not go up again because the prices were when they were before he passed away. They were basically at the height of the market. So right now, a lot of that stuff is it's getting a little bit harder to sell that stuff because there's just so much of it out there.
Yeah.
So he's the rare exception. When Kobe Bryant passed away, I mean, the influx of people buying everything they could find on him was just insane. And the people looking to sell the stuff that everything they had was a gold mine. But the rush for his stuff, once it leveled off now, it's a lot harder to sell for the crazy numbers that he was selling after he passed. So it usually depends on the athlete and how much stuff is out there on them and how popular they are. I mean, Kobe was a sensational ball player, one of the greatest I've ever seen also. But his stuff has definitely gone up, but it's leveled off now because the demand, isn't as high as it was right after he passed. Yet his stuff is generating high dollars now.
Yeah. Who's an athlete that a lot of people wouldn't expect this, but maybe they didn't sign too many cards or sign too many shoes, who it's just really hard to collect the memorabilia because there's just not much out there?
Pick a sport.
Boxing.
Boxing, you don't see a lot of stuff on Sonny Liston. I mean, there's also an interesting story with Sonny, how, whether or not he really did commit suicide or if it was just because he didn't take a dive in a fight. But his stuff, you don't see much out on him, and he's very hard to find. I have a signed photo in my collection. I'm always looking to upgrade on him. He's just not that easy to find. And the older vintage, the John L. Sullivan's, signing him on a sign in a boxing post is very difficult to find. You'll find his autograph pretty plentiful, but you won't find it in a boxing post. Same with Jack Johnson. Mainly the rarer boxers, the guys that died young or died quite a while ago. There isn't a lot of stuff out there.
That's really interesting about Sonny Liston, because Sonny Liston, obviously a legendary fighter, but probably most known for when Muhammad Ali was able to beat him 2 different times. But he's the guy who's really mysterious in a lot of different ways. His death, we're not necessarily sure when he was exactly born. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding him, but an all-time great fighter.
He was also a heavyweight champion. He was no slouch for Muhammad. And who knows if that was a phantom punch or not? We'll never know the whole story, but it leads to the mystique of boxing.
Yeah, it truly does. I think that's why it was so incredible. My favorite boxer? I'll give you 2. One, Floyd Mayweather. He's always been my favorite growing up. Whenever Floyd fights, it's like a holiday for me and my family. And if I don't get to go out to Vegas to watch it live, I usually go to a movie theater to watch it. And it's one of the most exciting times. And it's very interesting for me because I always know he's going to win. It's not like any of my other favorite boxers when they fight.
Mm-hmm.
And my second is Shannon Briggs, as a personal friend of mine, and someone I've grown up all around. Let's go, champ. He's obviously a different type of relationship I have with him as opposed to Floyd, but still my favorite boxer.
He's part of the Triple Threat. Did you know about the Triple Threat?
No, what's the Triple Threat?
Mark Roberts was the boxing promoter, and his friend Russell Weissman, a good friend of mine, I was friends with Mark. Triple Threat was Charles Murray, Alfred Ice Cole, and Shannon Briggs. They were the Triple Threat in all different weight classes, and they all were champions at one time or another. And Shannon is the one that's lasted the longest, and Shannon was actually an extra in some movies also. So it's interesting. I mean, Shannon's a great guy. One thing I will say, in all sports, some of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet and the most down-to-earth guys have always been boxers.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, you know what, Les, I agree with that too, because as I listen to you guys, I have a couple of questions. First of all, do some of the foreign fighters that were young ever get, like, let me use an example, like Duk-koo Kim. Would there ever be a market on guys that died a little bit earlier since there isn't a whole lot probably out there?
Well, I've handled one thing ever signed by Duke Kim, and it was his contract to fight Mancini. I have a poster from that fight, and Mancini's very superstitious. He won't sign anything. There's a Sports Illustrated cover. He won't sign anything involving Kim because he feels so horrible about what happened.
Right.
And that's just he's just an amazing. Mancini's an amazing fighter. And Mancini, there was recently a story on ESPN where he met Kim's son, and he had a nice conversation and spoke to him, so he's friends with his son. In answer to that question, yes. I mean, the Davey Moores, the guys that got killed in the ring, you don't see much stuff on them, and when you find stuff on them, it's an easy sale because it's so hard to find. The Salvador Sanchez's, guys that died young, right. Very hard to find. Marvin Hart, virtually impossible to find an autograph on him. He was a heavyweight champion, short period of time, and people don't have much on him. You can't find much on him.
Well, amazingly enough.
So, in answer to your question, yes, the older vintage stuff, the hard to find stuff, it's getting harder and harder, but it's more of a challenge to find them. I mean, like right. in running, I've had in my career, which is over 60 years now, I've had one Steve Prefontaine autograph, and that was virtually impossible to find. So. Right. So the finding the stuff is the most fun. It's like a treasure hunt. Once you get a lead on something, you follow up and you keep on following up and you keep on hoping that that's authentic and you get the provenance, the story behind it, and it's just an amazing feeling when you finally get that autograph that you've been looking for to complete something.
Well, amazingly enough, I watched a Dooku Kim Ray Mancini fight, and that was a really close fight, too.
Yes, great fight.
Right. Either one of them, unfortunately, could have been killed. And, again, I believe when that fight was over with, the distance was 15 rounds. I think they narrowed it to brought it down to 12. I think that fight might have been the one that where they went from 15 down to 12, if my memory serves me correctly. And also, I'll point out something else, and you both are right on target with this. I've actually had photos of James Lights Out Tony, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, and you guys, to me, boxers are the most down-to-earth fighters. And one of the things we'll be doing on the network is focusing on a lot more boxing content material, because I feel that this is a niche market that we can get ahead of a lot of networks on, and that's what motivated me to bring both of you two on together, because it is a niche market, and Zach certainly has a big history of it, so it's pretty interesting so far. So Zach, go ahead and ask him a lot more questions that you have. I know. 1 second
before Zach, I got something to tell you.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the Mancini Duck Kim fight poster in my hands right now, the onside poster. Mm-hmm. I didn't even realize. I haven't looked at it in a while. It's in my vault here. Did you know that Kim was the Korean and the Asian champion, and his record going into the fight was 17-1-1?
Yeah, I did know that.
And Mancini was 24-1-1. He was the WBA champion.
Yeah, you know what? I knew that he had a good record. Let me expound upon that too, Les. When I was working at a local weekly paper, we had a staff writer that was writing on boxing. She didn't know what she was talking about because she thought it was a lopsided fight. So I went to the publisher of the paper, and his name was Peter Blueston at the time. And I told Pete, I'm looking at this boxing story, and if you trust my judgment, I wouldn't publish it the way it is because I thought the fight was really close. And he said, really? Yeah. I said, I watched the whole thing myself. This outcome could have gone either way. So he decided not to publish it. And I told the lady that wrote it that I'm sorry to dampen your parade, Ann, but I'm not going to do it. I trust Scott's judgment. And being in the sports business like I am, he decided not to do it. And then I told her, if you want it published, at least just edit it a little bit so that it provides the accurate picture of what occurred. So, and I think that validates why, and that's why I wanted to bring this to the forefront, Les. So I'm glad that you were able to bring that up. Good points by both of you guys. I'm really pleased at what we're working on here tonight. Good job for the two of you. Zach, continue on.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, just combat sports athletes in general have been some of the nicest guys I've ever met. A lot of people assume because they fight for a living that they're barbaric or mean-spirited individuals, but that's been the opposite for me. I've met some of the nicest people ever. For people who fight for a living, they know their power. They know that obviously they're no real danger. So they don't really have a complex like that, like most people do. They're not insecure about themselves.
And some of them are. I mean, I remember meeting in the 70s, I met George Foreman, and he was a very shy and timid guy. Even at the press conferences, you'd see him back in the day. He wasn't who he became later on after he made his comeback. So not all these guys are very outgoing. Muhammad he's the one that set the whole example of how to really promote your fights and be outgoing and hyping everything up. So some of the guys do start out intimidated, but they realize in order to make the real money in any sport, you really have to show your real personality and show who you are.
Well, you don't get it grilled by accident, and George Foreman realized it, and I used mine very well. And one of my good friends in boxing for a lot of years, and I know Les, you probably went ahead and met Angelo Dundee. You want to talk about one of the nicest?
Oh, he's a great guy, yes.
And I think he had a brother that promoted his, that was also a promoter. I don't remember the name, but Angelo Dundee was a personal friend of mine, Les and Zach. And I've got actually a couple of signed photos with Dundee in my studio, and it's really good stuff. It really, really is.
Anytime you're connected with the greatest, you can have a lot of great stories. And interesting enough, I just was on the phone yesterday with Muhammad's dentist, and he was telling me some stories. Like, you can't believe some of these things, how Muhammad was such a nice guy. And anytime he needed money, he would just go and give him money to the dentist. He said, "That's not." And he had this training, one of his guys coming to give him the money. And he said, "Oh, that's not enough. Give him more." So you don't hear that too often. And unfortunately, a lot of these boxers are so generous in there while they're fighting, they don't manage to save enough money. They don't have enough money to live on afterwards. And I'm sure you know the story, the Schmeling-Lewis relationship. Are you guys familiar with that? Did you ever see the movie?
No, I didn't see the movie at all.
Are you familiar with that, Zach?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Schmeling, defeated Joe. Joe defeated him afterwards. But Schmeling started, I think it was a Coca-Cola distributorship in Germany. He became extremely wealthy from it. He also during the war, rescued a lot of Jews, and he kept them in his apartment. He also, and after Lewis, he bonded with Joe very well afterwards. They became very good friends. Unfortunately, Joe, didn't have much money. He became a greeter in Las Vegas. When he passed away, guess who paid for his funeral and everything?
I'm going to guess Max Schmeling.
Yes, he did. I mean, you don't see that, and you don't see that in any other sport but boxing, because these guys go in the ring to not just fight; they go in the ring to kill each other. And a lot of guys have unfortunately passed away or been injured seriously, and they don't have their wits about them. And these are two fighters that actually during World War II were the two biggest things going on in sports back then, and countries were behind them. So this just shows you, I mean, there's so many stories in boxing that aren't told that should be told about how relationships are bonded. Like Jerry Cooney and Larry Holmes, they fought a few times. They're the best of friends, and they're both wonderful guys. And in my recollection, there's only a couple of fighters that have ever really done very, very well financially, and one of them is Larry Holmes, and the other one is George Foreman. The other guys, unfortunately, didn't have a pot to piss in because they didn't have good handlers. They got ripped off by the promoters, and it still goes on. So there should be more guidelines for that. And I've always thought that these fighters, the current fighters, should be setting up some kind of a retirement fund to help the older fighters, because a lot of them have been institutionalized. They don't have a lot of money, and a lot of them, unfortunately, they have Parkinson's, or they have Alzheimer's, they have something, and it's just terrible. So,
and on that point, on fighters who fought each other and then later became friends, I hosted a party for Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder too, and at the party I had Shannon Briggs and Jameel McCline, and those two guys fought a very long time ago, but they did fight. When they see each other in person, there's absolutely no sign of that. You would never know they ever hit each other, and they're very good friends.
Yep, and that's the great thing about sports is these guys become friends afterwards. But I always say that boxers, I think, are some of the most true blue guys in any sport, whether it's male or female.
Well, they do have a fraternity for sure, and nowadays there's more fraternizing going on than there ever has been. But when it comes to football players, there's a good bond there. Baseball players, a lot of team sports, but yeah, boxers.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they're not, but
right.
I mean, how often are you not going to see Mike Piazza and Roger Clemens be buddy now after what happened with their incident? But these guys that were hitting as hard as they can for as long as they can to try to kill each other,
right?
And then become best of friends. I mean, that's you don't see in any other sport than boxing.
Yeah, no question about that, Les. That's for
sure.
That
and now you have the what do you call it? Conor McGregor, guys like that are fighting, and they go in and they really like to kill each other. I mean, I was watching this past weekend with my son, and these guys are going in there like gangbusters, and they're beating the crap out of each other, and yet they still hug each other and they embrace each other. And you don't see a guy. I've never seen. I don't know. Correct me if you guys have ever seen. I've never seen a guy score a touchdown. The other guy hugs him, saying "Great catch" or "Great play," or a guy scores the game-winning shot, and the other team hugs the guy and says "Congratulations," or the guy, or a quarterback getting knocked out, and the guy picking him up and saying "I'm sorry." You don't see that often. I mean, that's the kind of camaraderie in boxing that you don't see in other sports.
Oh yeah. So.
I completely agree.
Let me ask you a question, Scott. Who's your favorite fighter of all time?
Come on, Les, Muhammad Ali, without a doubt.
And why, though?
Great personality. Whenever he said something, he backed it up. He was just, to me, he's my all-time favorite hero. I have a photo with him in my house and everywhere I'm at. And I met him, spent about a week with him here in Miami. And to me, Muhammad Ali was an ambassador to his sport, and he was a heck of a fighter. He promoted it, and if you're going to walk the walk, then you talk the talk. You got to walk the walk, right? And he did exactly that.
He's the one. In my opinion, he was the greatest promoter of his fights ever. I mean, no matter who he fought, no matter how good or bad that fighter was, you knew who he was.
Well, he knew how to get
still know
people's
he
heads,
is.
too.
I mean, you got Ernie Shavers, who's making money just because Muhammad called him Acorn Head and the hardest puncher he ever faced. And you got guys like that. You've got Chuck Wepner, who was nobody. No one ever heard of Chuck Wepner. He's the Bayonne bleeder until he took Muhammad 15 rounds. Rocky, Sylvester Stallone made the movie about him.
Right.
So Wepner even made his own movie afterwards. Over the last few years. So you don't. Anybody that ever came from anything that Muhammad had anything to do with has always been very, very successful and very, very well established in their area.
Well, Muhammad Ali also is a master of the mind games. Anybody that can come up with a rope-a-dope strategy, as he did with Foreman, to me is unbelievable. I mean, he outsmarted a guy that was so much more powerful than him. And, when you look at Muhammad Ali, you talk about the absolute mind game, guy who mastered it well. He was really smart the way he went about doing things. So, yeah, what's there to say, in my opinion, negatively about Muhammad Ali? I'll say nothing. And having spent a week with him and Angelo Dundee, and, of course, the boxing, to me, Muhammad Ali stands alone at the top. He's just a class act. He backed up everything, and he made that sport what it was. I don't think nowadays the older generation of fighters really appreciate what Muhammad Ali did and those before him. I really don't. And the biggest thing is he never dodged an opponent either.
No, not at all. And he didn't. I wonder what if he were alive today, may rest in peace. I wonder what he would say about Anthony Joshua, who dodged Deontay Wilder. Now all of a sudden he can't wait to fight Tyson Fury, but he's got to wait till Wilder fights Fury again. So these fighters now, it's just crazy. I mean, then you had a guy like Andy Ruiz who wins the heavyweight title and doesn't even train basically for the next fight and comes in 20 pounds heavier than he was in the previous fight when he won the title.
Right.
I mean, you don't have the heart, you don't have the desire, you don't have the skill now of some of these guys that they don't care that much about it anymore.
That's true.
I mean, okay, Ruiz won. It was a big upset. He won the fight. He made a lot of money. But have the respect in yourself and in your body. If you're the heavyweight champion, to take care of yourself. Muhammad never would have let that happen to himself. I mean, look at how he took a beating from a lot of these fighters like George, and he won. And he won. I mean, he fought Larry Holmes, and Holmes didn't want to fight him because Muhammad needed the money. So he didn't want to fight him, and that's what they say is part of the reason why the Parkinson's set in from the punches that he took when he fought Larry. Because as you guys might know or may not know, Larry was one of his sparring partners early on in Larry's career.
I remember that. So, Les, I believe Zach wanted to ask you what were your favorite memorabilia pieces. Is that right, Zach?
Yeah, what are some of your favorite boxing or sports memorabilia pieces that you currently have?
In boxing, my boxing memorabilia? Well, not going by value, one of my most precious things in my own collection is a picture of I with Muhammad together when we just squared off and had him sign it. So that's one of my most precious things in my boxing collection. That along with a couple of contracts of Muhammad's and checks and other things. But the picture with is, I use it on my website. I use it on social media. So to me, that's the ultimate. I mean, there's not too many times that I've ever asked for pictures with certain people. But Muhammad was just, he'd go in a room. It could be 500 people with no one there, knowing that Muhammad Ali's coming in there, and everybody, once they hear him talk for maybe 2 seconds or 2 minutes, they all want to be around and hear what he has to say. He had such a charisma, such a way about him. I've never seen it again in another athlete. The only other person I ever met at a book signing, who my wife never wanted to go to any of these things. She actually came when we were dating to see Muhammad, was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has a definite aura about him also. So certain people have these auras about them that is just amazing. When you meet them, talk to them, and find out how they really are down to earth.
So you go from favorite memorabilia pieces to the most expensive memorabilia pieces. Les, I'm sure that it's easy to break them down into categories, right?
Pick a sport.
Go ahead, Zach.
What's your most expensive boxing piece?
Most expensive boxing piece I've ever sold?
Sold, yeah.
Sold or bought?
Both.
Or handled? Most expensive boxing piece I've ever... Actually, this is an interesting story. Not the most expensive, but the most bizarre thing I've ever handled was a jockstrap, a fight-worn jockstrap. With full documentation. And next year is going to be the 50th anniversary of that jockstrap. It's the jock that Joe Frazier wore when he beat Muhammad Ali. Came with full documentation from a guy that got it himself, sold it to a famous sports writer, who sold it to a famous boxing promoter, who invited me into his master bedroom in his house, and I felt a little weird going into his master bedroom, and the bed wasn't even made. And I'm going, I said, okay, what do you got? What are you showing me? Pulls out from under his bed in a Ziploc bag a dirty jockstrap. I said, well, what the heck is that? Well, P.S., it ended up being the jock that Joe had beat Muhammad with. I said, of all things, right? So I couldn't wait to, do my research and figure out what to do with it. And I put it into an auction, and it sold. And guess who bought that? I mean, I still can't believe it. I can't wait to see it. Guess who bought it? Make a guess, guys.
I
Give you one guess each.
I don't have one.
Okay, Zach, let me hear it. Take a guess.
I don't think I have a boxing museum.
What, Muhammad Ali's wife, maybe?
No.
I didn't think so, but it was...
That's your one guess. Okay, Zach, it's up to you. The pressure's on. You can't phone a friend. You have to do it right now.
Yeah.
What's it going to be? Who do you think?
I have two. First in this, I'm going to guess... Muhammad Ali's wife was a good guess. I'm going to guess a boxing museum bought it to display.
That's not a bad guess. Actually, Ripley's Believe It or Not bought it. I haven't seen the display yet, but I can only imagine.
Ripley's
So
Believe
they're
It
the
or
ones
Not
that bought that. So that wasn't the most expensive thing I've ever handled, but it's the most bizarre thing.
I went to Ripley's Believe It or Not in Tennessee.
So if you see the jock, or if any of our listeners out there see the jock on display, just send me a picture. I'd love to see what it looks like on display and how they figured out how to show it. Because a robe and shorts and shoes and socks and gloves and wraps and headgear and everything are easy to display, but how do you display a jockstrap, a dirty old jockstrap?
Well, I got to tell you this, Les. I did have an opportunity to meet Chuck Wepner down in Fort Lauderdale, and Chuck and I had a great time talking, got some photos, and I ended up writing a story of him. So he's certainly
a character.
Yeah,
I've met him numerous times. I bought a bunch of his stuff from him.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff. Zach, you have any other questions you want to ask Les?
I think it's awesome that we still have these people out there to preserve the history of boxing as a sport with a tremendous amount of rich history and what's been going on for centuries. And I think it's awesome to hear from someone who's been able to go through it all and met a lot of these guys in person and that's able to collect such awesome stuff.
Oh, thank you. Now, elaborate a little further. I mean, probably the most expensive thing I've ever had that I wish at the time I had the money to have kept held on to in boxing was Rocky Marciano's belt. I had his championship belt, his Golden Glove belt, and I had his shorts. That was since been sold a few times. I don't know where it is right now, but that was the most expensive thing I've ever sold. That, and along with Jack Johnson, there was a ruby medallion that he received as world champion by Degas and Klotz. I can't remember. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but that was the only thing that was given back in those days, and I had that also, and I was able to sell that also. So that went significantly amount of money, but you never know what things are worth, and if anybody has anything out there that needs to know what the value is, you can always just send me some photos or an email. I'm happy to give them a free evaluation. And just mention Scott and Zach. That was on the show, and I'm happy to help you.
You know, with that said, I have a question. I have a couple of Mickey Mantle Hydrostone statues. I'm wondering if the value of those went up when he died, because I know that I ended up buying them over at Cooperstown.
What do you have on? Be a little more specific.
Hydrostone statues with him holding a bat, swinging it.
His signed statues?
No, they're not.
It's just a statue of his, then, right? Is it who did this? Who made the statue? Do you know?
I don't have the specifics. I can let you know off air.
That would be how to determine the value of it.
Right.
And it's all a matter of spending the time and doing the research and looking up comparables and stuff. As far as anybody that, unfortunately, when they pass away, that means they stop signing or they stop doing things. Right. So that their stuff becomes a lot harder to find. So Mantle was one of my idols, another one that I met him numerous times. Not quite as congenial, as nice as Muhammad was, but he still was a nice guy. And I've collected a lot of stuff on him, but his stuff definitely has appreciated over time.
Yeah, I mean,
the king of. Do either of you guys know the most valuable merchandise you ever want to have of any particular athlete in all of sports is, as far as memorabilia?
Yeah.
Take a guess. One each.
I'm going to guess Babe Ruth.
And what's your guess, Scott?
I would go with Ty Cobb.
Babe Ruth, winner, chicken dinner. Babe Ruth by far. One of sports' biggest icons and one of the most collectible athletes ever.
So let's talk about Cal Ripken Jr. How does he have any stuff that's relatively that's worth a whole lot of money?
The key thing on these athletes, the most invaluable things are if they won a championship ring, a rookie of the year ring, any trophies they have, but their jerseys is what's most expensive. Their rookie card, like a Cal Ripken rookie card, is not going to be as much as a Mickey Mantle or Hank Aaron or a Hannes Wagner T206. That's not going to be as much value. But the Cal's jerseys, when he broke the record, his bats, anything he used during the record is going to be worth money. But usually jewelry is the hardest because most of these athletes never give up their jewelry. And over the last 20, 30 years, you hear more athletes selling their memorabilia because they want to raise money to help their grandkids go to college or to raise money for their family or for a charity. Recently, Brooks Robinson did something like that. One of the greatest guys you ever want to meet in baseball, and one of the best third basemen I've ever seen. And being a Yankee fan, we had Clete Boyer, but he was no human vacuum cleaner like Brooks. So yes, the icons, the vintage memorabilia of the older athletes is always going to appreciate. It's always going to be the most valuable to have and the most valuable to keep.
Well, what about Barry Bonds, for that matter? I can only imagine that's a loaded question.
Well, you know what? We've got a couple of guys right now in the Hall of Fame and the commission that's in the Hall of Fame that did do steroids. And I got news for you. Before Sosa and McGuire actually had that runoff for the home run derby, the home run title that year, Barry got jealous, and that's why he started taking steroids. But I heard stories when I was with ESPN, traveling the country. I heard from a couple of writers that when Barry Bonds was in the minors, he would ask to do batting practice before batting practice, have the one-arm band, the pitching machine. He'd go in front of home plate, and he'd start hitting the ball for hours before batting practice even started. He was such a good hitter. So I believe that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you're allowing a lot of other athletes every time period. He had drinking, from the time to the 70s. Everybody's doing drinking, the little drugs here and there. I mean, even though they're not good role models, and I don't think they should be in the Hall of Fame, you have a lot of guys that are in the Hall of Fame. So what did Barry do? He did nothing wrong except he got jealous of the other guys, and he had the skills. If you look at his statistics before steroids, before that became rampant, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Same with Roger Clemens. Why are you holding these guys back? Because they took something everybody else is getting away with. I don't think cheaters should prosper, but in this particular instance, you're already letting cheaters in. So what are you going to have, 2 Hall of Fames, one for cheaters and one for non-cheaters?
Well, I'll tell you what, Les, knowing that my mentor has a vote in the Hall of Fame, a lot of these baseball writers aren't going to put them in no matter what people think. That's just the way they're old school. They will have no part of them, but it's a good point, though. So, Zach, do you have any other questions you want to ask Les?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Les, that I think Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Pete Rose should all be in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Rose's biggest mistake, is funny you bring him up, his biggest mistake was not admitting that he did it. Had he admitted it, he'd been in the Hall of Fame, I believe, already.
Yeah, I agree there.
So that's his error, his mistake.
Well,
and unfortunately, I met Ron Santo a couple of years before he passed away, and I told him it's pretty ironic that you're going to make the Hall of Fame and you're not going to be alive to see it. It's horrible. And to me, that's the biggest travesty in sports, is when you put someone in the Hall of Fame after they pass away. Oh, yeah. That's horrible. The athletes enjoy the opportunity to get into the Hall of Fame with the best of the best, his peers. I mean, that's just crazy in my opinion.
We saw that with Ken the Snake Stabler.
What about Kenny? He's another one that got in after he died.
Yeah, that's what when I saw him get in the Hall of Fame after he passed away, that was very sad.
But unfortunately, if you ever take a look at the Baseball Hall of Fame, see how many athletes and front office people were selected as opposed to elected, you see a big difference in numbers. And I believe, I've had this argument and discussion with a lot of people. I believe that the only athletes that should be in every Hall of Fame should be the best of the best, the ones that totally dominated this sports, not guys that are compilers. I mean, no disrespect to Harold Baines's or Don Sutton's or Lee Smith's, who compiled their statistics to get in the Hall of Fame. I believe that the top echelon, the Mickey Mantles, the Willie Mays, the Joe DiMaggio's, the best of the best should be in the Hall of Fame. Not guys that just hung around for 20, 30 years, won 300 games or had 3,000 hits or 500 home runs. Those guys shouldn't be in there. And that's just my belief. And in all sports, I think if you go to any Hall of Fame, it's all about the money. They only do the Hall of Fame inductions because they need people to be there and they need someone to get into Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, there's not going to be Derek Jeter's going to have to wait a year before he gets to enjoy his Hall of Fame induction. In all the other sports, it's terrible, but when you really look at it, these Hall of Fames, that's how they make their money. And that's not the way they should be making their money. They should be making their money by having the best of the best in the Hall of Fame, not any Tom, Dick, and Harry that spent 20, 30 years to compile statistics to get in the Hall of Fame. But that's just me having a rampage on that, because I think they should be more selective. And if I were a Hall of Fame balloter, I would be more selective.
Well, I got to tell you, though, Les, with all due respect, baseball is one of the most difficult Hall of Fames to get in. Period. 75%. They don't let you in at 74.8. Just so you know.
But what about the old timers committee, Scott?
Well, I understand that comes a little bit later, but it depends on who's voting when. You follow me? Compared to whatever. I mean, we can have a Hall of Fame debate with baseball all day long, And again, you don't know what writers kept them out for whatever. So it's fair to give everybody a decent chance if they're borderline. But, that's...
Well, then explain. I agree with it. Explain to me why. Did Ted Williams get in on the first time? Did he deserve to be in on the first time?
Well, I don't know. First of all, the Hall of Fame, when it started, I think back in the 50s, maybe he didn't. I think DiMaggio got in, I think, on the third time. So you're talking about choosing, hold on, Les, you're talking about choosing guys with the first 2 or 3 years, which would force them to be second and third ballot Hall of Famers. But I see your point. You don't want to think that you're going to flood it up too badly, but unfortunately that's how it is, and they're trying to recognize who they are. And again, baseball writers have different opinions, and it also depends on what city they were in, whether they have a bigger media market, more voters. So there's a lot more variables that we don't have the time to talk about. But I see your point. You're not looking for the Hall of Very Good. You're looking for the Hall of Fame. And I get you.
Absolutely. Hey, explain to me how in this world that one writer can't pick themselves up and admit that they didn't vote for Derek Jeter and ruin his unanimous voting. I'm a Yankee fan, and there's a lot of players in a lot of different sports that I will say deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
After meeting Derek numerous times, quality man, he carried himself like a captain. He was the top echelon of sports to be represented, and him for one voter to vote that he wasn't the best shortstop in his time period, to make him not be unanimous. I think that person should be stand up and have the decency to get up and say, I didn't vote for Derek Jeter because, instead of standing behind the fact that they don't have to reveal it. I think that's ridiculous.
Then you better invest into a bulletproof vest, Les, because that's what will happen with this guy in terms of social media. But as far as I'm concerned, Derek Jeter should have gotten 100% of the vote like Mariano Rivera. There's no debating that. I know. But that's as far as, let's stay on point a little bit, though, about boxing. Zach, you mentioned to me before that you wanted to ask him a question about advice. Want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So as kind of a closing statement and a final thing to say, Les, what advice would you give to an amateur sports collector?
As far as collecting, I would say collect what you like. You don't need to get a theme. Collect what you like, and then eventually but mainly try to collect vintage memorabilia, meaning the older stuff. Find an athlete, find a team that you follow, and collect that one team, whatever that team might be. If you're a Yankee fan, collect Aaron Judge or Gleyber Torres. If you're a Giant fan, collect. Madison Baumgarten isn't with them anymore. Collect your favorite player, something that you can connect with, something that makes you. The first time you ever go to a ball game or you go somewhere, your first date, you remember where you went. The first baseball game, you remember what happened. You remember what stadium you went to. You remember that one particular player. He could be the most fringe player, came off the bench. I remember the first World Series game I ever went to. Jim Mason was a Yankee. The Yankees got beat by the Cincinnati Reds. But Mason came off the bench and hit a pinch hit home run. I didn't collect him, but people, I'm sure, did collect him because he hit that home run. That was his big claim to fame. So you never know. I always tell people, collect what you like. This way you can always appreciate and enjoy it. So, it's your memories. So no one can take away those memories. So collect that.
So with that said, would you say that media guides are worth any money or yearbooks?
Everything in memorabilia is worth money. It's just a matter of finding the right person that wants to buy it at the right time.
Okay, very good point. All right, well, we got a few more minutes to go in the broadcast. Les, I'll let you lead off and let everybody know who you represent and how they can find you. Go ahead, Les.
Hi, my name's Les from Les Wolff Sports. It's LESWOLFF Sports, SPORTS, LLC.com. You can always go to my website, or you can check out my email address at LWOLFF1823 @AOL.com. Or if you want to call, 516-933-7787. Send me any pictures that you have. You want free evaluation, but show me your best stuff. I want to see what you got. Show me what you made of it. And if you have any questions, just let me know. And thank you for listening, everybody out there. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Scott, and you, Zach. And it's always a good fun time to talk about memories. Because you know what? Memorabilia is our memories, and that's what keeps us young. Whether it's our family pictures or our collecting, that's what keeps us young.
All right, well, we'll let everybody do their thing, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, Les, go ahead. Zach, how can everybody find you other than the fact that you're our new co-host for the Sports Exchange? But what else you got going for you?
I'm Zach Hirsch, or Mystic Zach. You can find me at iPickWins on Instagram. Hit me with an email at zachpickswins@gmail.com, or go to my website, ipickwins.com.
And as far as we're concerned, you are listening to the Sports Exchange on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. The way you can follow us is through Twitter. I have a Twitter account with Scoop and then 5-3-3-3-3-3, count to 5. The other account I have, the business account, at Tribune South. You can also follow us on Facebook at South Florida Tribune. Like us on Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. And we have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune, as well. The website is www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a lot of great art stories from our media distribution partners, as well as columnists, as well as the broadcast section. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Scott Morganroth Gets It Done. As for the shows on the network, we have the Sports Exchange, the one you're listening to now, the South Florida Tribune podcast, which covers non-sports related subjects, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk with my co-host David Levin, The Real and the Rare with Xavier McKnight, the Fantasy Football with myself and Ryan Schoolroot, and Motorman and Rude Dog. We encourage you to check out every one of these broadcasts, and you can find them through the website. In terms of how you can go ahead and locate these broadcasts, we are affiliated with Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Podcast Addict, Deezer, and Podchaser. You know, guys, it's been a really great show. I've enjoyed it very, very much. And it's not often we get a chance to talk about sports memorabilia, but I think it's something that people should really take note of because, you know, you may have a lot of hidden gems out there, and this is your opportunity to find out what they're worth. And before we get off the air, I want to thank all of our first responders out there. I wish everybody, tell everybody to please be safe, don't take any chances, and use common sense. It would be too easy to expose yourself any earlier and premature. And I hope that everybody can utilize our broadcast as an opportunity to go out there and use this as a diversion from what you're doing. So, because we want to feel like we work very hard to prepare this and give you some really excellent entertainment. So, guys, it's been a pleasure having you on the broadcast, and I thank you both for being on the Sports Exchange tonight. So, on behalf of Les Wolff, Zach Hirsch, my name is Scott, the Motor City Madmouse, saying good night, everybody, here at the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. Have a good night.